Hi, it's Tarrant.
And Stella from Meeple University on the Dice Tower.
Today we'll be teaching you how to play Champions Rise, game designed by Nick Bloxham Carter and Anthony Thacker and published by Nefarious Duck. We are using a prototype copy of the game. Much of the art is not yet complete and the rules and components may not be final.
Let's get to the table.
Champions Rise is a cooperative battle card game for between 2 to 5 players. Each player will play as a champion with a specific specialty, and 2 decks of cards will be shuffled together to form that character's deck. These will be used in order to try to attack a chosen villain in a given battlefield which may or may not favour that villain. Play continues until either the villain or all of the champions are out of health, and the players will win if they can defeat the villain. When you first set up the game, you'll need to split all of the cards into their constituent decks, and there will be 20 with the basic version of the game. Each deck is distinguishable by an icon in this top box next to the title, and each card within a given deck will be of a similar colour of art. The champion and specialty cards will all have the yellow back, the villains will all have the red back, and the battlefields will all have the green back. Each deck will have one card called the profile card, which will be face up in play and describe specific rules related to that deck. The champion profile card shows this helmet icon, the specialty shows this hand, the villain shows the skull, and the battlefield shows the crossed swords. Some decks will also contain one or more cards showing specific, more detailed rules relating to that deck. To set up a game, you'll choose the villain that you want to face and the battlefield where you wish to face them, taking those relevant decks. For each, lay out the profile card and any rules cards, follow any setup instructions unique to that deck, and then shuffle the corresponding decks. Any leftover villain and battlefield decks are set aside and not used in the game. The rules on these areas may vary significantly. Lady Avara, for example, has a second draw deck made of tattoo cards, in which case you would have to go through the deck and find those corresponding cards in order to complete the setup rules. Give the villain health tokens representing its starting health. Here, for example, it's 30 plus C, which is the number of champions in the game, multiplied by 7. So in a 2-player game, for example, this will be a total of 44 health. Next, each player chooses a champion and a specialty deck. Once again, set aside the profile cards and any other cards that come with that deck to explain rules, and then shuffle all of the remaining yellow-backed cards together to form that player's deck. Each player then takes a player board, placing the 2 profile cards in the corresponding slots and the deck to the left. Take tokens representing starting health, and then take all of your coloured cubes into a supply. These are your generic resources and they'll usually relate to your energy, although some characters in the game have some other mechanics. Eben the Captain, for example, also uses them as treasure. Each player then takes 4 starting energy and draws 4 cards from deck as a starting hand. Each player has a once-off mulligan opportunity and may discard as many cards as they wish from hand, shuffling them back into the starting deck before drawing back up to 4. Choose a first player and you're ready to play. Champions Rise is played in rounds and each round follows a very specific sequence. Each phase involves drawing or resolving cards from a different area of the board. First is the battlefield phase, where cards are drawn and resolved from the battlefield deck, some affecting your villains and some affecting you. Then comes the champions phase, where in clockwise order, starting from the first player, champions will take actions. Then comes the villain phase, where the villain draws cards and attacks the champions. And finally is the recover phase, where first player rotates and the champions gain more energy and cards. Rounds continue to be played in this manner until either the villain has been defeated or all of the champions are exhausted, that is, out of health, at the same time. So now let's look at each step in sequence. First is the battlefield turn, and you'll do this in 4 steps. First, look for any cards, rules, or effects out on the board which resolve at the start of the battlefield turn, and resolve them now. Here, for example, advancing the knight token one step. Then comes the villain battlefield draw, and you'll draw the top card of the battlefield deck and then resolve it as if it had been drawn by the villain. Here, for example, this is a unit, and after drawing it, the villain puts it into play, adding its health, and may use it to attack on an ongoing basis. Then comes the first player battlefield draw, and the current first player draws the top card and resolves it in the same way as the villain. In this way, the battlefield deck can have a variety of effects, but they're going to be spread between the villains and the champions through the first player. Finally is the end of the battlefield turn, and you will resolve any effects on your cards, villain cards, or battlefield cards, which state at the end of the battlefield turn. Next comes the champions' turns, and starting with the first player and going clockwise, each champion completes a turn under this sequence shown at the top of the player board. First is start of turn, and any effects showing on cards which resolve at the start of your turn are resolved now. Next is the side action phase, and unless you have a card which states otherwise, you may perform one side action, which is indicated in the game by the letters SA. There are 5 basic side actions in the game: draw 1 card, heal 1 health, attack 1, which means to do 1 damage to 1 enemy unit or the villain, energize, which is to gain 1 energy, or aid. This comes into play only when your fellow champions have started to lose all of their health and become exhausted, and so I'll come back to that one later. Additionally, some cards or profile cards in the game will have another option as a side action available, and you can also resolve this as your one side action phase action. If you have the ability to take multiple side actions in the same turn, then you may take the basic side actions as many times as you wish. However, side actions on cards may only be used once each per turn. The third step is the play phase, and here you may play as many cards from your hand as you wish and can afford. To play a card, take it from your hand, place it face up, and then pay the energy cost printed underneath the title. In this case, it's 2. There are 4 types of cards. An action is simply resolved and then discarded immediately. The other 3 types of cards are durations, equipments, and units, and each of those cards will be placed face up into your play area and remains there until removed through an effect of the game. Some cards will have the word unique, and if that's the case, then you may only have 1 copy of this card in play at a given time. Equipment and duration cards may have an explanation on them for how to destroy that card, and sometimes it's an optional destruction in order to get a more powerful effect. Others have no such instruction and remain in play until destroyed by some other card in the game. Units, on the other hand, all enter play with a certain amount of health, and they may be attacked by opponents. Once a unit has run out of its last health, it is discarded from play to your discard pile. As mentioned before, you may play as many cards as you can afford and wish to during the play phase. However, if you choose to play no cards, then you may take another side action instead of your play phase. Per the same restriction as before, only the basic side actions may be performed more than once in an entire turn. Finally, you will resolve your end of turn phase, and once again look through all your cards and find anything with text which says it resolves at the end of your turn. Play then passes to the next champion clockwise, and once all champions have taken a turn, passes to the villain turn. To resolve the villain turn, first resolve any start of the villain turn effects on any cards in play. Then draw and resolve the top card from the villain deck, either putting it into play if it's a unit or discarding it after an action. And then resolve any end of the villain turn effects. Finally, resolve the recovery phase. Each champion gains 2 energy and draws 1 card from their deck into hand, unless they have any cards in play which change those draws. If your draw pile ever runs out, shuffle your discard pile to become your new draw pile. First player is passed to the next player clockwise, and play goes on to the next battlefield turn. If a champion ever loses its last health, then that champion becomes exhausted. The champion discards all cards in play, all cards from hand, and loses all energy. The discard pile is then shuffled back into the draw deck to form an entirely fresh draw deck. This champion is out of play until it is able to cash in 5 banked energy. While exhausted, it will skip its entire turn and will only gain 2 energy without drawing a card in each recovery phase. Other champions may speed up the recovery by taking the aid side action, where another champion spends 1 energy and the exhausted champion gains 1. That champion is then revived as part of its first start of turn after it has 5 or more energy banked. All of this banked energy is spent and the champion gains health equal to twice that amount of energy. Then, as at the start of the game, that champion gains 4 energy, draws 4 cards from deck, and may do a single mulligan of as many cards from hand as desired before continuing with play. The rest of the rules you need to play the game are written on the cards, but there are some keywords that need to be defined in order to correctly interpret them. Any card in the game which can attack or can be attacked, or any card which has health, is considered a unit. The main unit that you control is the champion, and the main unit you're fighting is the villain. Collectively, those two are considered characters. All other units are non-characters. Any non-character units fighting on your side are considered your allies. Any units, character or otherwise, on the opposite side is considered your enemy. Likewise, the champion and its allies are considered the enemy of the villains. So this villain action, for example, which deals each enemy 3 damage, will target each champion and each ally of each champion, because every one of those units is enemy to the villain. Some units come with armor, or can gain armor as the result of another card being played. Armor blocks that amount of incoming damage without itself being consumed, and so in this case here, the first 2 damage of any hit dealt by an enemy would be absorbed by the armor. If an attack is shown as piercing, this ignores armor. There are also 3 temporary effects in the game, which can come as the result of some cards and usually last for a round. These are represented by these tokens and include cannot take damage, cannot deal damage, and vulnerable, which increases the amount of damage suffered by 1 each time damage is suffered. The game can end in one of 2 ways. If all champions are simultaneously exhausted, then it ends in defeat for the players. But if the villain runs out of health, then the villain is defeated and the champions win the game. And that's how to play Champions Rise. We hope you enjoyed this video.
When we film this video, Champions Rise is going to Kickstarter, so we'll put the link in the description below when it is live, so you can check it out. If you find this video useful, please help us by hitting that like button and subscribe to the Dice Tower if you haven't already done so.
And if you have any questions, comments or feedback, please leave them in the comment section below.
See you next time!